Here's some simple bird photography tips to combat one of the most frustrating things when it comes to photographing birds. I don't feel like this is talked about very much. Oh, there he is. I can't. Oh, where's he? Oh, crap. When photographing birds, we typically want to use a longer telephoto lens, usually something in the 500 to 800 millimeter range. The issue with this is, as we go up in the telephoto range, or more zoomed in, our field of view continues to decrease, making it ever more difficult to find the subject in the viewfinder. Another complication when shooting with a telephoto lens is that minor adjustments from where you are at with the camera can have a drastic impact on what's in frame, and this can depend on the distance to your subject. But even a millimeter adjustment left or right can have meters of an effect on what's in frame, depending on how far you're away from the subject. The first and arguably the most important tip is to learn muscle memory. And what I mean by this is getting the feel of what it feels like to pull the camera up to your eye and lock right on to what your subject is over and over. Like learning to play an instrument, it takes time to build that muscle memory. So what can you do with your camera to help build that muscle memory? Now, I'm going to use this fluffy microphone cover because it's really the best thing I got with me right now. We'll put it up in the tree somewhere a bird would probably naturally sit. And you don't have to use something like this. You can use a distinguished mark on a tree, part of your fence, a printed out target, whatever you want to do. The goal is to get that muscle memory down by repeatedly locking on to your subject. You want something obviously that's distinguishable. And when you start out, as simple as it sounds, just consistently go up and down. Try and make sure that as you're going up, you're locking on. And then as you get more and more comfortable with this, start walking around and going from different angles, as if you would be shooting out on a bird walk or something. So you're walking along, looking around. If you see something out of the corner of your eye, you really need to be able to quickly turn and lock onto it. You can do this from home. The important thing is to get that muscle memory down of bringing the viewfinder up to your eye and consistently locking on the subject you're intending to shoot. Because I don't know how many times I have missed opportune shots by not being able to find the subject in the viewfinder. I think this is an essential skill that every wildlife photographer needs to learn, especially with birds. Some of the moments are gone in milliseconds. The second tip once you've worked on muscle memory is just to use a zoom lens. I know that seems kind of silly, but what you can do with a zoom lens is ensure that you're fully zoomed out and gives you a much larger field of view. A lot of the popular wildlife zoom telephotos usually range from 200 to 500, 180 to 600, and give you a large distance to play with. The only real downside to this is when you're fully zoomed out, yeah, it may be easier to find your subject, but you do waste time if you're trying to zoom in. Now, if you're walking around with your zoom lens and keep it fully zoomed out, when you bring the viewfinder up to your eye, you're gonna have a much wider field of view and make it much easier to find your subject. The real downside with this is you usually wanna zoom in after you find your subject, and this can waste some precious seconds. And like I said before, with bird photography especially, milliseconds matter. The other potential issue with this is if you get too used to using a wide field of view to find your subject, it doesn't force you to have to learn that muscle memory. So even if you're using your zoom lens fully zoomed out to help give you some margin of error when you're pulling the viewfinder up to your eye, then try your best to continually get it in the center of your frame, even with a wider field of view. So like I said, you can practice from home doing that, but if you're out in the wild and you're fully zoomed out and trying to practice this, yeah, keep it fully zoomed out, bring it up, but look at where your subject is when you bring it up to your eye, and always try and get it in the center. The third tip is to work on stabilization. I know this kind of goes along with muscle memory, but when you get that viewfinder up to your eye and you get your subject in focus, it's not going to help you much if all you're doing is this. It's very easy to lose your subject, especially in a bird in flight, and then you're doing this groundhog pop-up. Where did he go? Where did he go? And it's very easy to miss shots that way. So some tips. I know I like to hold this from the tripod mount. You don't have to hold it this way, but the goal is to have a good 3 points of contact on the camera. And I tend to not smash the camera into my face, but use it as a third point of contact to help stabilize the camera. And do what's comfortable for you and play around with it. To really test if you've got your stabilization down, turn off your IBIS or in-body image stabilization and whatever vibration reduction features your lens has. And then try and frame subjects. Pull it up to your eye Is it shaking all over the place? I mean, likely it is, and it's going to for everybody. But if you're doing a lot of shaking, you may not realize how much that IBIS is compensating, and that vibration reduction or image stabilization is working overtime to compensate for shaky hands. So try and turn all that off, and then try and shoot. And really pay attention to how stabilized your lens is. And if you need to adjust your grips, play with some different techniques, then try it, because in the end it will help you. I'm sure people are sitting there thinking, well, why don't you just use a tripod? That is a great option, and you can absolutely do that, especially with some of the heavier wildlife lenses. There's nothing wrong with shooting with a tripod. When I'm doing photography, prefer to walk around. It's more for exercise for me, and I like to be out just wandering around and kind of catching whatever comes up. But if you want to shoot with a tripod and sit, that is totally fine. And that will eliminate a lot of the issues when it comes to stabilization. But then it does bring up some more issues when you're trying to have to learn the muscle memory, again, of how the tripod works and being able to find stuff in the viewfinder. Now, one final tip if all else fails. If you've lost the bird and you're doing this motion, trying to find it again, if you flip your tripod mount to the top of your camera, pull your hot shoe cover off, and this depends on the camera and some are set up differently, but it works for a lot of them. You can almost use your hot shoe with your tripod mount as an iron sight, as if you would in a rifle. And this can actually give you a pretty good indication of where you're pointing the camera. And it has saved me a few times. If you take anything from this, it is to practice, practice, practice. I know it is a somewhat anticlimactic conclusion, but I promise if you take some of these techniques and apply them and practice them, you'll miss far less shots. And when that one opportune moment comes up, you'll capture it.